Hey everyone, welcome to Cuberviews, episode 57. This is your host, Ian Braverman. I hope you're having a really good day so far. Today I am joined by Andrew, also known as Warrenfish. How you doing?
Doing great, Ian. Happy to be here. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's always fun talking with you. Like we've seen each other at a few Cube events like CubeCons and most recently, I believe, Capital Cube Championship last year.
True facts.
Awesome. You were telling me that you're actually going to your monthly Cube meetup in a
This
few
afternoon. So
hours.
I've got to finish shuffling and making packs for that as soon as we wrap up.
Is there any overlap with that and Joe Anderson's Cube events?
He is coming today.
Oh, he's coming today.
He often makes it down.
Very cool. And you get like 30 people. That's sweet.
Yeah. We have a good time. So people get to feature their cubes, and we try to make sure that everyone gets a chance to show off their work, so we can share and play each other's cubes. It's a good series of events.
And you have your Tressorhorn Gardens cube, which we'll be talking about later in the event, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but that is true.
Very cool. That was also at Capital Cube Championships, and I heard a lot of really interesting talk about it. Like people were saying, like that's a mean cube, but it's
It
cool.
is. It is. Yeah, Grixis is not a nice place, and I made this cube mean on purpose. You can read the overview is all about how you need to get ready for fear.
And tell me a little bit about yourself, your history with Magic, Cube.
Yeah. So I started playing Magic in 1994, and the first pack I bought was revised. You could still get legends here and there, and I haven't played, continuously all that time. I took a break after high school for the Star Trek and Star Wars card games that were big then. Before even retail draft was really something that Wizards was thinking about, we made like our own limited environment with ballpoint pen on basic lands so that we could play with, Black Lotus. I couldn't afford the $100 at the time asking price for a Black Lotus, so we just made what would now almost certainly be called a cube, so that we could play with all the cards that we didn't have, and reuse the same limited environment with those cards over and over again. As far as Cube is concerned, I think that my first foray into it was when it was called the Holiday Cube on Magic Online. The first cube in paper that I made properly myself was a vintage cube 6 or 7 years ago now, and yeah, I love Cube.
That's awesome. So, why did you come back to Magic from those other games? Was it when they kind of died out, or were you
Well,
like, I want to go back to Magic?
they did die out, and I saw an Achroma Angel of Wrath in a display case when I was buying packs for the also now defunct Lord of the Rings card game from Decipher, and that just broke my brain. There was no creature that was that good that didn't have some horrific downside back in the early days, and so that got me paying attention to Magic again.
It sounds like you've always been an enjoyer of angels, which we'll talk about later in the episode.
That is absolutely true. In high school, I had a deck with Stasis and Time Elemental with Sarah Angel as the win condition, and my friends politely but firmly insisted that I stop playing that deck.
Come on,
'Cause we-
everyone loves a good stasis.
Well, yeah, I mean, when it's an asymmetrical stasis is the best kind. So, I get to untap all my stuff, and the game is basically over for you.
Yeah, it's just another way to win.
Yeah.
And what are some of your hobbies outside of Cuban Magic?
Yeah, so I love reading. My wife and I like to travel. We just got back from New Zealand.
Oh, wow.
Uh, I like to do watercolors. I've done some alternate, mana symbol glyphs for sleeve and token backs. Cooking, hiking, nothing too obscure.
I see some paintings behind you. One of them is Aurelia. And then did you paint the other one too?
No, that is a oil painting of my hometown
Oh,
that my mom's dad bought from the artist that I chose as a thing I could have from his bequest when he died.
you're talking, you got the Aurelia painting behind you. You're telling me about this angel deck. I can totally see why you had to have angels in the cube. And today we are going to be talking about, it's a tongue twister, the Melded Mardu Monarchy.
Yeah,
Tell me about
the
this
original
cube
name
and why
for
did you make it such a tongue twister?
the original name for the cube was inclined plane, which I thought was extremely clever since it's a wedge set of colors. But
Oh,
when I was submitting it for CubeCon, this name seemed like it would get more attention than a pun.
it's always about getting the votes, you know?
You got to get those votes.
And This cube was in CubeCon.
Yeah, twice.
First off, tell us what this cube is.
Sure. So obviously, it is a cube without green or blue cards, with the partial exception of Kenris Spellspear and Burning Tree Emissary. As you mentioned, I have a couple of three-color cubes, and I always like to put the sword of the other two colors in there. So we've got Sword of Body and Mind in this cube, which is occasionally mechanically relevant if you've got your Kenris Spellspear or Burning Tree Emissary or token. But in terms of what the cube is about, I was inspired by the bug cube at the first CubeCon, and I started working on this on my way home from that event as a cube that I thought I could put together. I mean, my vintage cube was never going to be something I actually had that cube accepted to the first CubeCon. They changed their mind on unofficial game pieces leading up to it, and they said, "Well, if you can get your hands on, $50,000 worth of cardboard,
Yeah,
we'll
just
be
buy a
happy
Black
to."
Lotus for next week.
Right. And I politely declined that invitation. But this cube, I started as something that I knew I could get all the cards together. I still had my set of singleton dual lands from high school, for example. I love the kinds of things that these colors can get up to when they aren't hosed by some of the sort of natural predators to big dumb creatures and playing to the board that you can get out of green or blue. So I had a couple of cards that I really loved that I wanted to put in. I have altered Rakdos's Return that Darkin gave Rakdos a tuxedo and a top hat. That card is not in standard anymore, so I needed somewhere to put it, and the cube seemed like a good home. The first version of it did have a Soul Ring and a Mana Crypt and a Mind Twist, Swords to Plowshares, and Path to Exile. And after the first playtest, those cards all came out. If you're trying to get to a 7 mana Angel, the investment of 1 mana to get rid of it makes that a serious bummer. So now, like, we still need 1 mana cards to get rid of Ragavan on time, but like Harm's Way does that job perfectly well, and also does some interesting things later in the game. So the way I described it, and what I was going for with this cube is cinematic action. The turns are going to be, like I said in my CubeCon video, an escalation of trading blows, so that the game is not over. There won't be a board stall. There won't be a slow, painful death. It's going to be haymakers and stories. I designed for stories.
Yeah, it's really interesting because Mardu, when I think of Mardu and like what Mardu is, like I always think about like the Mardu Pyromancer deck from Modern from a
Sure.
few years ago that was all about like two for ones, getting incremental kind of grindy value with cards like, oh, a young Pyromancer, Kolaghan's Command, Seasoned Pyromancer, just kind of like these little incremental piece of value. I also definitely think with like kind of small creatures, kind of like an Alesha that smiles at death, bringing back your little creatures and kind of
Hmm.
grinding out little pieces of value with my murderous red capped and my Anafenza and like these little kind of trinkety creatures to get in an early game pressure and attack your opponents quickly. Lots of removal, one for ones, two for ones. Is that what you were really going for to like kind of build that vibe of like what classic Mardu feels like? Or were you trying to expand past its boundaries too?
Yeah, so there is some of that. I mean, you've got Ragavan and Ocelot Pride, and for getting early aggressive creatures that accumulate a lot of value. You've got Mayhem Devil to grind out an opponent that way potentially, but you have to have a plan for Aurelia the War Leader in a deck like that, because the games usually go long enough that someone can play that that card off of 6 lands and turn the game around. If your only plan was to chip away at your opponent with small efficient creatures.
Yeah, because I can definitely imagine like if both players are playing that game plan, it kind of reminds me of with Kyle when we talked about his control cube, how you have to kind of
Mhm.
like rethink it in your mind where it's like, okay, I'm playing control. And what do I have to do as a control cube? I need to beat little aggro creatures and like kind of go survive the early game to get to late game. But when it's all control mirrors, you have to kind of build your
Yeah.
control deck differently. And it's like, okay, for this cube where it's like these little grindy creatures and like, oh, I'm gonna have my Ragavans, I'm gonna have my Ocelot Prides, but my opponent's doing the same thing. Probably they're gonna have a lot of early game blockers. They're gonna have ways to kind of gum up the board. I could totally see what you're saying of being able to get to the long game and be able to play these bigger haymakers.
Yeah, I mean, one of the decks that trophied at the last CubeCon melded Brazella, which was a highlight for me. I had to go find that player and take a selfie. Gisela Bladed Gold Knight can turn an army of Ocelot Pride 1/1s into a joke if you can't deal with it. That is so the early game efficient creatures or going wide is certainly a valid approach to victory in this cube. But you also have big creatures, and then one of my absolute favorite things to do in Magic is to have some kind of damage doubler or damage increase like Torbran with Teralf. So if your opponent has a board of small creatures, that can mean the end of the game out of nowhere from cascade of increasing damage off of those creatures. So you can win with Cellar Spawn from the Duskmourn commander set that damages your opponent if you spend less mana for something than its value. Makes Bolas the Citadel into a suicide pact. I tried to bring in niche interactions that will keep the cube replayable, that also bring me joy. And I made this color combination for this cube in part because there are so many of those things that have been fun for me over the years.
So did you purposefully draw back aggro? When I think of Mardu, like red is generally an aggressive color.
Yeah.
White can often be a very aggressive color. Black can definitely be an aggressive color. We've seen black aggro decks in constructed formats. Did you have to kind of pull in some of these like really powerful aggressive threats so these later game strategies can survive? Like one thing that I see with this cube is you have a very extensive maybe board. It's like I was actually when I was researching the cube, I accidentally clicked maybe board and there was like 360 cards. And I
Yeah,
was like,
there's
oh,
a
this
this
is the cube. And
yeah.
there was a lot of really powerful cards in there, like very high power, like broadside bombardiers. And did you purposefully like take some of those out to slow down some of those kind of decks?
Yeah, so I mean, broadside bombardiers crossed sort of a threshold of efficiency that I thought would destabilize the rest of the strategies in the cube. So it's not trying to be everything that's the most powerful in these color combinations, even though, there are things that are going to be reminiscent from Vintage Cube. I have Ocelot Pride, but I don't have Guide of Souls. I have Lelia, but I don't have Inti. It's a balancing act to make aggro, powerful, enticing, viable, as exciting as some of the rest of the crazy stuff you can get up to in this cube without it being the obviously best strategy. One of the local drafters is convinced, and this is still true, I think, even though I've made some changes, that the best deck in this cube, if you can get it, is all of the 5-drop haste dragons. And I feel pretty good about that being the best thing to do.
Yeah, if my opponent's just slamming in with a bunch of like glory bringers and goldspan dragons and thundermont hellkites, like that's cool. I mean, that's not like I'm dying at least turn two to a Johnny and like or
Yeah.
some nonsense like that.
Yeah, two mana Johnny also, I think, too warping for what I'm going for with this cube.
Yeah. And one thing that I really want to talk to you about, well, two things, we'll get into each of them, is of course, this cube is Mardu in its name, but it's also melded and monarchy. So those are two big parts of this cube that are kind of highlighted. And monarch is a really interesting mechanic in my experience. Like I've ran it in multiple cubes, like especially I had it as a big part of my peasant cube for a while. For example, with cards like Feast of Succession, which is really powerful, which is
Yeah.
a 6 mana board wipe. Everything gets -4/-4, and you become the monarch. It's very interesting because if both players are able to kind of get in with a lot of aggro and have a lot of creatures on board, then it can become a very back and forth gameplay where it's
Hmm.
like, okay, I have my flyer, I get in, okay, you take it back, and then oh, we get back and forth. But I've also definitely seen Monarch kind of warp games and create really strange things, maybe in a higher power level. That doesn't happen as often. But like, for example, if I'm playing a blue-white control deck and I have like 3 creatures in my whole deck, and my opponent plays a Monarch card and now they're getting a free Phyrexian Arena that I can't get back, it's like, oh my gosh, what do I do?
Well, so yeah, you hit on a couple of the things that steered me towards the way that this cube is put together. I had a couple of goals when I was designing the cube with respect to the Monarch. At that time, It hadn't been very long since Palace Jailer was one of the big boogeymen of the Magic Online Vintage Cube. Like, well, this card just ends the game. And my challenge to myself when I was designing this cube was, can we, Palace Jailer is in the cube and is very good. But if there are 30 other cards that make you the monarch, that situation that you just described doesn't come up very much because you can't just sit on the monarch. Even if you have board control, your opponent can play a card that that makes them monarch, or sacrifice a land that makes them the monarch. I wanted to have some more sources of card advantage that at least red and white are not traditionally good at. The monarch drives games to be contended on the board, which I think is fun and has proved out well for the cube. But having so many cards that do it makes each one less warping of the game in the way that you talked about, because you can't count on it. I mean, people tried to do control decks with all six of the court enchantments that make you the monarch are in here. You can't just sit behind those, because if you lose the monarch, you have a downward spiral pretty quickly.
Yeah, and it's really interesting what you were talking about with, like, for example, Palace Jailer, because if people don't know what Palace Jailer is, it's 2 white, white, 2/2. When it enters, you become the monarch. When in Palace Jailer enters, you exile a target creature an opponent controls until an opponent becomes the monarch. So it's a really powerful card, but there's definitely a lot of risk to it. I mean, if I play this 4 mana 2/2 when you already have a couple 3/3s in play, for example, or a couple flyers, and I play this, I take your creature, I draw one card, but then you're able to get it right back, then all of a sudden you got your guy back.
And now
You
you're
have the
drawing an extra
monarch
card every
now.
turn. Yeah.
I'm not able to take it back from you. There's a lot of risk in playing monarch cards, especially I would think in a cube like this that has a lot of creatures and evasion, able to get it back efficiently.
Yeah. The riskiest way to bring the monarch into play is attacking with the back of Starscream, which makes your opponent the monarch if someone is not the monarch already. That is inadvisable unless you give Starscream first strike, and then you make them the monarch and hit with a creature in the second damage step, which gets you the monarch right back. That is a fun trick. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it creates a an escalation of power and risk that is what this cube is all about.
Do you think that there are some cubes that it's better suited for than others? Like, for example, I found in my peasant cube that in a lower power environment, especially when the cube was older, like maybe 5 years ago or something, when we didn't get as much power creep in commons and uncommons. I mean, some of those cards that give you the monarch, like, for example, Feast of Succession or Fall from Favor, those cards were like unbeatable if you weren't able to get the monarch back. I
Yeah,
think that
and
they've kind of lowered in power over time with more power creep. But do you think that there are some cubes that they're right for compared to other cubes?
yeah, I mean, I think if there is a lot of focus on combat, that is going to be more interesting. But I also think that it's just not even a big deal in this cube anymore compared to how controversial, inflammatory Monarch could be when there's just a few cards. Even in a powered vintage cube, it's just part of it. Power level of cards that make you the Monarch falls off pretty quickly if you're trying to include all of them. But there are enough that if you wanted to do something like what I've done here, I don't think it has to be an issue, because you just get a high enough density of cards that change hands of with the crown outside of dealing combat damage.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it becomes a lot more interesting when there's a lot of them, I think,
Yeah,
because like if there's only like one in the whole cube and I take it, all of a sudden the
it
opponent
is
might
going to
be
feel
caught off
unbeatable.
guard.
Yeah,
They might be like, oh, all of a sudden there's Monarch and what do I do? Compared to it's like, it's literally in the name of the cube. Like people are going to be expecting it. And everyone's going to have probably multiple Monarch cards, build your whole deck around it. And I think that it is interesting because the higher power level of the cube, I would say over time, it's become more exaggerated as we've gotten more power creep. It feels like getting the Monarch, like for example, in a vintage cube, is not as backbreaking as it used to be because it's just like one extra card a turn. It's not like the end of the world anymore, you know?
yeah. I mean, and it's a lot less complicated than something like Initiative, which I
Yeah.
wouldn't put in this cube. For my personal preference, any cube lightly. It's not at the same level of the new Power Crypt Boogeyman.
Yeah. Initiative is on another level. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah. And of course, another big part of this cube is also the melding. So
yeah.
I think that melding is really fun. I run like multiple melds in multiple of my cubes. Like for example, you have it in here, and I also have in another one of my Rakdos cube, Mishra, claimed by
Hmm.
Gix. which melds with Phyrexian Dragon Engine. Tell me about why you've put an emphasis on these melds.
Well, every time you pull off a meld is going to be a story to tell. And like I said before, having exciting stories to tell after a draft of my cubes is always something that I'm after. And I just love those cards. I mean, I was sad that about what happened to Bruna and Gisela, but that card is awesome, or those two cards in combination. And I also have Hanware Township meld in here. Those two cards are not as exciting, maybe on their own in every context as the other four. Giving a creature haste for an extra red was pretty good until we got Arena of Glory.
Yeah,
But it's
it's
still giving your big chonker haste is worthwhile, and there are enough go wide and token ETB incentives in the cube that the garrison is also a desirable piece. It's exciting, flipping the cards over and making a giant card is a visceral thrill on its own. Never mind how the game becomes all about that game piece from then on.
I love what you're saying about stories and creating like big moments. I mean, I totally agree. When people in my Rakdos cube, for example, have been able to meld the backside of Mishra, it's awesome. I mean, you literally get this huge card on the board. It does a million things. Sure, it gets like Oblivion ringed or something, and it's sad, but it's sick. It's like, come on. And I have the same thing with the Urza that flips
Yeah.
from the same set in my Bant cube. And it's also awesome. And especially because I think both of the cards are not that bad. Mishra, people, when they originally read it in my Rakdos cube, are like, this card is too many words. Or they're like, what does this card even do? But
Yeah, but
it's
attack
basically like
once
a
with it
hell
on the
writer.
board. Yeah.
I mean, if people don't know what it does, whenever you attack, each opponent loses X life and you gain X for X number of attacking creatures. And then it has the flip ability. But that alone, that's pretty powerful. I mean, it's literally just a hell writer.
Yeah.
And the Phyrexian Dragon Engine
Well, it's
being
a drain life hell rider.
yeah, it gains life too. And the Phyrexian Dragon Engine being a 3 mana 2/2 and colorless with double strike that can draw you cards. It has Unearth. It has a lot of synergies with, like, literally, for example, the card Unearth you could play it with to be
Hmm.
able to bring it back and get a lot of value from that. I just think that's really cool. I love mail cards.
I hope they keep making more.
And that kind of leads me into another topic that I wanted to talk to you about that we kind of hinted at is you have Bruna in this cube, the Fading Light, which melds with Gisela into the big, huge angel. But I think that this card almost is like a perfect signpost for this cube also, because when Bruna the Fading Light enters, it's a 7 mana 5/7 in white. You may return an angel or human from your graveyard to the battlefield and it has flying vigilance. It's also just like a perfect signpost because you have like an angels and humans sub theme in the cube too.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I mean, typal synergy is another thing that people love with good reason. And so the biggest support in this cube is for angels and for dragons. And you've got little dragons like the Dragon Engine, at least in terms of mana value. We have Giada in here to support curving out with angels. Like I said before, while the 5-drop haste dragons are a force to be reckoned with, curving out into huge angels, especially if you can keep Giada on the board, ends the game really fast.
I think it's really fun to, you are already going to include in this cube a lot of angels, for example, like, because
Mhm.
you love angels and angels are awesome. Like, for example, we got in Boros, we have Aurelia, the War Leader, that gives you extra combats. We have Gisela, Blade of Gold Knight, which doubles damage and halves damage to you. Shout out to my friend Peter, who played this in Commander, and he was always just like, oh my gosh, it would hit the field and the game would immediately end. This card's crazy, Gisela. Angels just feel so quintessentially Mardu, and they're really fun too.
Yeah.
And if you're already going to include a lot, you might as well just throw in a couple extra little things that kind of, when the drafter is in the seat, the drafter could see a Giada. And if people don't know what Giada says, it's a 1 and a white for 2/2 flying vigilance. Each other angel you control enters with an additional 1/1 counter on it for each angel you already control. And then it also adds mana for angels. So a drafter could see that in the draft and say, oh, maybe there's a little bit of an angel theme. And then that could kind of push them in a whole new direction that wouldn't have happened without a card.
Yeah, and a lot of the angels are interesting in more than one context. It's not just like I'm doing the angel deck, but I mean, so Gisela, Obviously, if you're doing damage multiplication, is the queen of that archetype. Liesa, Forgotten Archangel, that gets your evoked creatures back and hoses your opponent's graveyard. Bruna being able to reanimate a lot of the creatures in the cube are all interesting outside of a curve of angels. So that kind of intersectionality makes for more interesting replayability, and that's what I was going for.
How many payoffs do you think you need in a cube like that to be able to kind of draw players into an Angels deck, for example, even if it wasn't like, oh, I have 10 Angel Lords, for example, in the cube. Do you
Yeah,
have
you don't.
like a bunch or?
Right. I mean, angels are their own reward. Giada is pretty awesome, but you can certainly do well without her. So I wouldn't say that you need very much as long as the creatures themselves aren't a trap. If I can win the game on the back of one drops and efficient removal, then your 5-drop angel is just going to look really sad. Tweaking the interactions so that both of those things are viable contenders is how I've tuned this cube.
And did you also like purposely build like a deck into it, like with that in mind? Like if somebody's going to go with it and say, all right, I have Giada, I'm going to take every angel I see. Did you purposely put angels at different parts of the curve? Like I see you have Sarah Avenger at 2 mana along with Giada. And then you also have like, for example, Wojek Investigators, a 3 mana angel. Like, did you try and build like a curve for it?
Yeah, those cards are all interesting outside of, the angel deck. There's a whole clues synergy web that is pretty fun. Giving all of your clues exalted doesn't means you don't necessarily have to have curved through the angels. But I did think about that because while they're valuable in other decks, like I said, curving out with Giada is pretty awesome.
Yeah, totally agree. And another interesting restriction that you put on the cube that I wanted to talk to you more about was it says in the outline, there are no ways to cheat in big creatures at less than 5 mana besides the 4 mana Mardu Kaalia.
hmm
Tell me about why you decided to do that. Was that to slow down the gameplay, make it feel more fair?
Yeah, fairness or balance of, I mean, if you can entomb and reanimate, on turn 1 and 2, there are a lot of strategies that are not going to be able to compete with that I wanted to be fun in this cube. I have been challenged on that assertion, saying that Greasefang is cheaper than Kaalia, but that is a lot more work in this cube than just attacking with Kaalia. It was out of a sense of balance for some of the other archetypes that I wanted to be potent and fun.
Okay. Did you test the cube with these cheaper ones? Did you have animate dead or reanimate at some point and just felt like it created bad play patterns for
No,
this
I
cube?
knew that that was
Okay.
not what I was going for. I mean, everyone is extremely familiar with how those cards play out in, Vintage Cube, for example. While I want to be able to have some of those play patterns, the most efficient, still contenders in Vintage Cube versions were never on the table compared to something like Soul Ring, which I knew was probably going to be a mistake and survived one draft.
Yeah, just one.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you're more aiming for players to curve into these like 7 and 8 drops and be able to cast them naturally. That's really interesting because, like, when I think of black and red, and in my Rakdos cube, for example, there's a lot of creature cheat. I have like sneak attack, reanimate. And so when I see something like a Lord of the Void or a ancient gold dragon, my mind goes to reanimating it. So it's interesting
Sure.
you've kind of retextualized that.
Yeah, I mean, Lord of the Void is in there in part so that if someone drafts Kaalia, they're going to be able to get something that probably not going to be taken by another drafter. The level of removal and interaction in the cube is such that the game generally does go that far, or at least you have a pathway to casting your 7-drop naturally.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we mentioned earlier, you have designed multiple 3 color cubes. Like, for example, you have the Tresor Horn Gardens, which is a Grixis cube. You have your Junk cube, which is an Abzan cube. Tell me about how you've kind of designed these cubes differently and why
hmm
you built multiple. Like, for example, it's really interesting because Grixis is also black red along with Mardu, but of course it has blue instead of white. How did you make these cubes feel different? Did you purposely include different types of archetypes in the two? Why did you build these?
Yeah, so those two cubes are probably the farthest apart in terms of power level and experience of the three color cubes that I've done. The Junk Cube and Treasure Gardens, my Grixis cube. Jeremy and I, Jeremy, my pal from CubeCon, who's frequent appearance at Cube events, he and I will be seeing each other at Shoebox coming up soon, or far in the past when you're listening to this.
Jeremy was also
Uh,
at Kinetic Cube too.
yeah, so I had created my Mardu cube. He cornered me and said we should design another three color cube to submit to CubeCon the year after that. And while I said it earlier that some of the ways that Simic cards can prey on Mardu dreams are, allowing those dreams to flourish or be crushed in other ways in my Mardu cube. The junk cube is definitely there's no burn, there's no counter spells. You can, curve out and put dice on cards to your heart's content. So there are some cards in common between my Mardu cube and the junk cube, but we went out of our way to make them play differently so that the experiences are not the same. One thing Jeremy said to me when we were designing the junk cube was that I don't want to live in a world where removal is too good. And so, swords and path are definitely in that cube. So that cube is not as much about getting to play a seven drop naturally and have that work out the way that my Mardu cube is. There's so many cards, the things you think of associated with those colors, and it's called the junk cube to capture the entire history of what's fun or notable about archetypes in those colors. But like I said, it's an environment free of their natural predators. Tressorhorn Gardens is the exact opposite. So all of the rules that I gave myself for designing Melded Mardu Monarchy are not just out the window, but intentionally violated. So yes, you can stifle a fetch land. Every card that can be cast without having mana up that's interesting in those colors is in that cube. And what I said in the cube overview is anti-safety is guaranteed. So there are infinite combos because I wanted to have an expression of, well, not every, there's no time vault, but there are a lot of broken things that you can get up to and a lot of ways you can abuse your opponent that feel more mean than what I've tried to do with other cubes. So even though, like I said, there are cards certainly in common between those three cubes, I've gone out of my way to make it feel different.
So you built Melded Monarchy first, and then you built Tressorhorn Gardens after.
The junk cube was in between.
Okay, yeah. Did Tressorhorn Gardens like allow you to kind of explore spaces that you weren't able to in the Melded Mardu? Like
Yeah.
you weren't able to include these reanimation or really powerful cheat below 5 mana or infinites. And so it was kind of like a way to express those desires that you had. You didn't want to, maybe a bad word, but taint the Mardu cube, but be able to express that in another environment.
In a way, I mean, I will not pretend otherwise. The impulse to build that cube, Tressorhorn Gardens, was getting grief from my local cube group that I had something against blue cards. And so, like I said, I was in high school. I certainly was a mean control player a fair amount of the
Yeah,
time.
you just
But
stasis evil deck.
yeah, it was so evil. Yeah, that was right after Force of Will was printed that I built that deck. But yeah, so having exciting stack interaction be a more prominent feature. Each one of these three color cubes is a intentional subset of what's possible in Magic on top of the limitation to the three colors so that they have a range of experiences. I didn't want to make more of the same just with a different set of colors. So like you said, exploring interactions and design space that I intentionally left out of what I was going for with these other cubes.
And Horn Gardens is definitely like a higher power level, I would say,
Oh yeah.
than Mardu. Did you purposely build them at different power levels? Like,
Yes.
what kind of power level were you aiming for Mardu compared to Horn Garden?
I set out sort of signposts of what I was going for, like, playing a seven drop creature on curve because some of these seven drop creatures are so fun. I wanted that to be viable in Melded Mardu Monarchy. And that cuts off a lot of possible synergy interactions, like Reanimate, for example, that are going to make that a trap. if you're going to put out, an 8 drop in Tressorhorn Gardens, it's going to be because you have Tezzeret, Master of the Bridge, and enough artifacts that you can cast an Eldrazi for free. For me, with these cubes, it's what sort of echelon in terms of how abusive, how powerful the viable strategies will be.
Yeah. It's funny that you said that your play group said you hate blue. So you build trust because I had a similar experience. I built Bant Cube and then almost as a challenge to myself, I built Rakdos Cube. But also players in my play group were like, Ian hates Rakdos. And I was like, sure, that's kind of true. I want to show that I have a range and
Yeah.
prove to myself that I can build a Rakdos Cube. I'm not only Bant.
Yeah, I set out for some of that too, because even though, like I said, I've got a long history of control decks, it's not what I usually gravitate towards most of the time. I'll follow wherever the signals are leading when I'm drafting a vintage cube, even if that's into oops all counterspells. If I'm on, Arena, for example, in the Brawl queue, and I see, oops all counterspells Katara, sometimes I'm like, yeah, okay, here's your free win. I don't want to play that game right now.
I'm good. I'm out.
And so this Mardu cube, no one has to worry about that being what they're up against, in this cube. There's a lot of variety, but none of it is going to be that.
And you mentioned it before that you designed the Junk Cube, Abzan Cube with Jeremy. Tell me about the process of designing a cube collaboratively with somebody else. Like, how did that happen? Did you like get into a call and then like just kind of like, hey, what if we add this? What did you add this? Or did you like separately come up with ideas and then kind of come together afterward to talk about your ideas you had? Or what was the process of designing a cube collaboratively?
We created a shared Cube Cobra account, at the post CubeCon party where we started working on the cube. And, a couple drinks in, you can read the way that Jeremy dramatizes the story of the cube creation on the Junk Cubes overview. We asked Jay Bro and Caleb and a few others who were there, what is the card you would want to be certain was in, a Junk Cube? And then, over calls and Discord, we iterated on that list over the course of months until we got it into what felt like a playable state. We did a lot of test drafts, a lot of stacked hands and battlefields to, see how things would play out and whether that would work the way we wanted or not. So working on that collaboratively means that some things that I wouldn't necessarily have done by myself, and my initial impulse after my Mardu cube was to keep the removal such that, bigger creatures were less risky. Jeremy was emphatically against that idea, and the result that we came up with is nothing that either one of us would have done alone, and I think it's better for that.
It's interesting because, in my experience, cube design is a solo adventure. I mean, sure, you take in advice from your play group or feedback, or if you have it at a cube event, people tell you different ideas. But I can imagine that there could be some maybe drawbacks and also benefits to
Yeah, for sure.
designing it collaboratively. Like, for example, a drawback could be like, what if you get into an argument and you're not able to resolve, like, oh, this card should be in there, or this card shouldn't be in there, or this kind of archetype, or like you were saying with the removal, also benefits of like, oh, I would have never thought to include a card like this, or, well, yeah, I don't even know about that kind of archetype. I don't have any experience. I don't know how to build that archetype, but you are an expert at it or something. That sounds pretty cool. I would like to try and design a collaborative cube experience at some
Yeah,
point.
I
That
mean,
sounds fun.
it's important to have a design partner or a team that you can work through those kinds of things together. We tease each other and throw down, hyperbole, here and there, but ultimately we have a really positive, enriching working relationship, and we've designed a few other cubes together also.
Yeah, like for example, my friend Sam, I feel like we both love cube and we played each other's cubes a lot, but we have pretty differing ideas on cube. Like he'll tell me like all the time, like, Ian, this is stupid. Like, why do you have this card in here? Or at the same time, I'll be like, what if you added this card to your cube? And he's like, absolutely
Absolutely
not. So,
not.
so it'll be interesting to design a cube with someone like Sam, where we have such differing opinions. I feel like it could be a way to learn from each other too.
Yeah.
Like, how about we jump into a pack one, pick one of the Melded Mardu Monarchy cube?
Yes, let's do that.
All right, I'll read it off. We have Phyrexian Vindicator, white, 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 flying 5/5. If damage would be dealt to it, prevent that damage. And when damage is dealt to it, it deals damage to any target equal to that amount of damage. That card's cool. And I think it's really fun. We didn't get into it just having like four white cards or like really pip intensive cards to kind of like drive people into like single color decks when it's a
Yeah,
Mardu. I think
each
that's
each
fun.
cube has a devotion, each color, sorry, has a devotion payoff in this cube, and that is one of the multiple reasons that Phyrexian Vindicator is exciting.
Yeah, I think that's really fun. Then we have Felwar Stone, two colorless. Tap, add one mana of any color and a land an opponent control could produce. Pure Steel Paladin, white, 2/2. Whenever an equipment enters under your control, you can draw a card, and then Metalcraft, your equipment can equip for 0. Anger of the Gods, one red. It deals 3 damage to each creature, and if a creature die that way, exile instead, a sorcery. Henrika Damnathi, I don't know if I said that right. Two black for a 1/3 flyer. At the beginning of combat on your turn, choose one that hasn't been chosen. Each opponent sacrifice a creature, draw a card, lose a life, or transform her. And her transform is, I should have been more prepared for
Three,
that.
three, four flying Death Touch lifelink, and then she has an activated ability for one black. Each creature you control with flying Death Touch and/or lifelink gets +1/+0 till end of turn.
Yep. it's I had the pack one pick one in front of me, but I didn't think, oh shoot, I need to get the backside. Then we've got the Shrine, which has a very cool signature on it, which is the white black shockland. Grease Fang. Speaking of cheating things to play for 3 mana, one white black, 4/3. Beginning of combat on your turn, you can return a vehicle from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste, and you can return it to its owner's hand at the beginning of the end step. Ayara, First of Lochthwain, another triple black, so that devotion. Whenever she or another black creature you control enters, each opponent loses one, you gain one life, and then sacrifice another black creature, draw a card. We have Awen, Fearless Knight, 3/4, haste for 2 red-white. When Awen enters the battlefield, exile target creature and opponent controls with greater power. Legendary creatures you control gain protection from each of that creature's colors until end of turn. Huh, that's an interesting card. That's a weird one. I like it. We have Rip Apart, red, white, choose one, sorcery, deals 3 damage to any target, or destroy an artifact or enchantment. Despark, white, black, instant, exile target permanent with convert mana cost 4 or greater. Duress, which is target opponent reveals their hand. You can take a non-creature, non-land, and they discard it for 1 black. Aurelia the War Leader, 2 red, white, flying vigilance, haste. When Aurelia attacks for the first time each turn, untap all creatures you control, and after this phase, an additional combat. Custodial Lich. Finally, we have a Monarch card. When it enters, you become the Monarch, and whenever you become the Monarch, target opponent sacrifice a creature. And then finally, Generous Gift. Instant 2 and a white. Destroy target permanent. Its controller makes a 3/3 green elephant. Definitely a lot of removal in this pack. And as I said, I feel like Mardu is the removal colors.
For sure.
What do you think of this pack?
Well, there's a lot of different ways you can go here. Getting Grease Fang right out of the gate sets you up to pick up the pieces for that deck. There aren't as many easy discard outlets, but you do have some awesome vehicles to reanimate with Grease Fang. So I'd certainly support going all in on that
You can
at
do
the start of
Grease
the
Fang
draft.
Parhelion, like the Pioneer deck.
Yeah, the classic, and get yourself some angels. As you noted, the art for Aurelia is on the wall behind me, and it's hard to resist her instructions. Aurelia does not tolerate slackers. Uh, and I love Aowen. One of the things I did in this cube is it is possible to blank flicker your creatures, but not for super cheap. So there's no ephemerate, there's no cloud shift, but you do have Touch the Spirit Realm and Restoration Angel. So you can get into a little bit of good times with that. There's also good support for legendary matters, or at least fun support for legendary matters. So you could look at going that direction with Aowen. She's also just a great removal spell on her own.
It's a
But
little
I
harder
think
to like blink like a Grief Solitude, like
yeah,
break
you
it like
can't
Monarch.
scam
Yeah.
exactly. At least, Touch the Spirit Realm is the cheapest that you can get up to that. And I have done it a couple of times because Touch the Spirit Realm brings it back at the end step. When I solituded a creature that was going to attack me and then blinked it with Touch the Spirit Realm, my opponent, went autopilot into playing another creature with the rest of their mana for the turn. And I was like, man, my solitude's coming back. Don't do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is something you can do, just not at its most efficient, because then it starts to be the absolute best thing to do by a considerable margin with all the ETB value that there is in this cube. But as tempting as a lot of these options are, I think today I want to go with Phyrexian Vindicator, and then that leaves me
Oh,
open to Mono White Devotion, because there are good payoffs for that, or damage multiplying and reflecting with things like Anger of the Gods, there are enough ways to get into some serious nonsense with the likes of Phyrexian Vindicator. You can use your
Compare that
devotion
with like
mana.
Blasphemous Act, go
Yeah,
crazy.
there's and Rolling Earthquake. You can get big mana with your devotion and then burn your opponent's face off with damage off of your Phyrexian Vindicator, your Boros Reckoner, your Brash Taunter, etc. So that's gonna be my pick for today. What about you?
I think it's really interesting. This pack kind of shows like a few of the different archetypes or kind of little packages in here, like the Grease Fang with the vehicles, or Pure Steel Paladin would really push me into an equipment deck, or Henrika would kind of push me into maybe more of a sacrifice deck, or Custodial Lich, a more controlling, get the Monarch, hold it kind of deck, Phyrexian Vindicator, mono white. It's pretty cool that there's a lot of different directions you can go here. I think I'm not brave enough to, without playing the cube for the first time, take Phyrexian Vindicator, go pick one, as tempting as it is. I've definitely done it with Phyrexian Obliterator and just said, like, screw it, and my Rakdos cube. So I think that I would probably take Custodial Lich. I've
Sure.
seen that card at my game store that I play at, Games IRL in Avon. If you happen to be in the area, we're always looking for more cube people. My game store owner had this in his vintage cube, and this card would always be a house. I mean, it's kind of like a Ravenous Chupacabra that also just draws you more cards. And while there isn't a lot of ways to blink in here,
But there
blinking
are
these
a lot of
things
ways to become
nasty.
the monarch again. So you can let the monarch go lightly and then play another card that gives you the monarch, which gives you another edict out of your custody
Oh,
lich. So yeah, that is a scary card.
yeah, that card is interesting because it feels like a lot of Monarch cards are when you lose it, something bad happens. It's like, oh, my Palace Jailer, I lost it, they get their creature back. But actually,
Yeah.
losing this is not a problem because then I can get it back again. And yeah, that's actually really cool. I like that a lot. Yeah, so I think Custodial Lich might be my pick.
Hell
So
yeah.
definitely let us know in the comments what you would take from this pack. I think it's a pretty cool pack and kind of shows us a lot of the different packages and directions you can go in this cube. Yeah, thank you, Andrew, for coming on. It's been awesome talking with you. Anything you want to say here before we wrap up?
Well, I it was a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. If anyone wants to cajole me into creating an incredible additional three-color cube, that did happen at Capital Cube Champs, so you don't have to worry about that. If you want to look at my work in progress on Cube Cobra, go crazy. Other than that, I hope everyone is getting all the cubing that they want because it's a great time.
I still haven't seen a Teamer cube. I love Teamer. I would love to see a Teamer cube.
The local group here has at least one person working on a Teamer Cube because, of course, we
Oh,
also have Tyler's incomparable Jund Cube, the Junderdome. And
yes, that
so
cube is awesome.
filling out a full 10 pack of three-color cubes is, the inevitable box checking exercise that we humans are drawn to. But it's also fun to make three-color cubes.
We have to have a cube event that has one of every three color pair cube and then all 10 two-color pair cubes. And that's all the cubes at the event.
Hell yeah. Ellie Rice's Teamer Cube that was on Magic Online is awesome if you need something to look at. But if you're going to make your own three-color cube, I suggest getting it as close to playable as you can before you look at someone else's list, so that they don't exert undue influence on you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Andrew, for coming on. It's been great talking with you. And everyone, please like, subscribe, follow, all that. And I hope you have a great day. And thank you for listening.
Thank you.